And we are live for episode 35 of Lowering the Barrier. Hi, everybody. Today we have got a solo episode, just me. Hopefully, you're not too sick of my voice. If you are and you're 35 episodes in, or this is your first episode in a while, um, I have some bad news. I can't change my voice, without significant amount of effort. That transparently, I'm not, you know, sorry, I'm not ready to put that on. I'm not even gonna front and pretend like I could do a British accent or anything like that. If that would be more pleasing to the ears, I do wonder. What's the best accent out there? Man, Australian is really great. British is really great. Some people obviously have extremely different feelings on that. Some people really don't like it. But anyway, that's not what we're here for. We're here for the questions and the answers, the education, things like that, and that's what we're going to get into. I'll also give you a little bit of an update on some things that I've been working on, some AI stuff, a new fat loss calculator that I created, and maybe some controversy around that we'll get into. What I've been watching lately, but yeah, primarily the questions, the answers. We're going to cover stuff like why is it harder to lose the last 10 pounds, thoughts on 75 hard challenges, how to make better choices when you are going out for fast food and things like that. We have about 3 more questions on top of those ones. So let's get into it. So first things first, if you want to support me in any way, obviously this podcast is free, which is great. I'm very happy that I'm able to offer, this for free, which is really cool. But if you want to check out any of my paid products, I would check out the upcoming, depending on the time, date that you're listening to this, the upcoming program, The Change Project. My wife and I, Maddie, have been working very, very hard on it. There are 5 different archetypes or kind of personality types that we have categorized. We've talked about this on a previous episode, so in case you're a frequent listener, I'm not going to get really into the weeds of it, but you'll be able to find out information, especially as it gets closer. There'll be more and more information posted on my social media channels, on my website, and my email list, things like that. So if you're curious, I think you're going to be pretty blown away by it. We're really excited about it. One thing that I'm really excited about that I haven't actually publicly talked about yet, this is the first time. I always give you guys, the audio listeners, I always give you guys the inside scoop. Maybe it's partially because I have a little bit of ADHD and I just kind of go on a rant on this medium. And once I start, I don't want to, when people do that thing where it's like, by the way, I wanted to tell you something. You know what? No, I shouldn't. I shouldn't tell you that. It's like that's all you want to hear about. You know what I mean? So if I started saying like, "Oh, I should tell these people," I open up that door. I don't want to shut it on you. So one thing that we're doing is every single person who is in, there will be 2 tiers of the Change Project: a lower tier and then a higher tier. The higher tier will be about $40 a month. The lower tier will be about $25 a month. Those prices aren't locked in, so roughly, but pretty sure it's about what we're shooting for. At the $40 a month, in addition to a lot of the other stuff, you will get one of the components that you will get above the lower tier is your very own AI assistant coach. So the hope is that it will be able to respond to your check-ins, that it will be able to give tailored advice based on your situation, and that you'll be able to have this back and forth conversation. Maybe you're looking for brainstorming ideas to help, or somebody, an AI, I suppose, a coach, to help you brainstorm certain obstacles that you're dealing with. It has worked very well for that during our testing. Maybe you're looking for more recipe ideas, or maybe you want, hey, here are some ingredients that I have, could you create a 5-day meal plan, or 5 breakfast options, 3 dinner options, 7 dinner options? Could you create a grocery list based on all these things? There's a lot of capability within this, and I'm really, really excited for all of you to see it. So anyway, we're shooting roughly for that to be launched around late June. That's a soft hold, but we're looking like June 22nd potentially is where we're, again, softly looking for. Okay. So I would check out the Change Project, check out Forward Forever. As always, it's a phenomenal, booming program. If you don't mind giving us a 5-star rating, if you haven't done that already, I'm sure most of you have at this point because you are incredible people. And if you want to check out supplements, I'm sponsored by Legion. Code ALEXTME for 20% off your first order and double points on purchase. And I'm also sponsored by MacroFactor, the greatest diet app on the planet. Use code ALEX for a 2-week free trial. All right, what am I watching lately? I wish I could talk to one of you guys. What are you watching lately? I always love the recommendations. But here's what I'm watching: The Rehearsal, season 2 with Nathan Fielder. This guy is a certifiable genius. I mean, he is. After episode 1 of season 2, I literally just sat there like staring at the credits, borderline jaw dropped, saying this is art to my wife. Like it was so incredible. He's been this like comedian for a really long time, and he's kind of getting more serious, but these companies like HBO, for example, that he's currently working with on one of his projects, HBO is like, well, we're giving you money for a comedy, so it has to be a comedy. But he's tackling aviation safety in his own way, and it's so interesting how he blends comedy, but then the very serious perspective, goal of trying to reduce airline fatalities due to user error. So or human error, I guess I should say. So it's really, really interesting. Would highly, highly recommend it. I would consider watching the season 1 first to kind of get an idea, but season 1 is definitely more comedy driven. Season 2 is very funny still, but it is a more serious topic. We're also watching Last of Us season 2. If you are watching this, I'm very much spoiler free. I played the games. The Last of Us 2 was my favorite game, or is my favorite game of all time, up there with like World of Warcraft. Great game, still play it. And by the way, for those of you who who follow the podcast, you may remember that my guild was working very hard on downing the Goblin King Gallywix on heroic difficulty. Well, we've done it. It was very exciting. It was about 10:45 at night, like 2 weeks ago, maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago now, and oh my gosh, it was just like the end. It was so intense. We pulled the boss, or we like attempted the boss maybe 50 or 60 times. I've written down somewhere, which is down from about 120 from the last major boss that we fought months ago. So that was really cool. But it was a tough fight. We got it done. Yeah, Last of Us season 2. If you're currently caught up on that, probably some shocks, some surprises, as goes with different drama shows, and especially if you didn't play the game. If you didn't play the game and you weren't spoiled on anything, yeah, I'll leave it there. And then we're also watching The Studio with Seth Rogen. It's a great, great new show. Very interesting, kind of artistic in a way, very self-referential, a lot of fun. And I'm also watching Dragon Ball Z Kai. If you've seen my gym tour, my home gym tour, or anything like that, you probably saw that giant Goku or that animated photo on my wall. Not animated, but I mean, he's anime character, but it's not like animated on my wall to be crazy. But yeah, it's like the guy with the really big spiky hair. That's Goku from Dragon Ball Z. And so I'm just watching the full series. All right, that's what I'm watching lately. Let's talk about not some drama. Not drama necessarily, but let me get something off my chest. All right, so recently I created a max fat loss rate calculator, and I actually posted about it the day before this recording. So I'm recording this on May 1st, 2025. I posted it yesterday, at the end of April, and I'd been sitting on doing this for like 2 years, maybe 3 years. I had come across this article by Greg Nuckols of Stronger by Science where he talked about this study from 2005 by a guy named Seymour Alpert. Okay, Seymour wanted to find out what is the fastest you could pull energy from a pound of body fat. Basically trying to discover what is the fastest rate that you could achieve fat loss. Going faster than this hypothetical rate would start to pulling energy from a lean mass. Now, for people who are, trying to maximize body composition, you don't want to pull energy from muscle, right? You want to pull it from body fat as much as possible. So Seymour Alpert in this study, that to the best of my knowledge has not been replicated or anything like that, found that it was about 31 kilocalories. We'll just call them calories. If you're unfamiliar, calories with a small c is it's like the amount of energy required to make 1 milliliter of water 1 degree Celsius hotter. It's something like that. Don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. Something like that. And when we look at food, we are using kilocalories, so 1,000 calories, and we just shorten that to capital C calories. or we just call them calories because for all intents and purposes, that's just people understand. So anyway, he found that you could pull about 31 calories per pound of body fat per day. Now, in a subsequent interview, Greg Nuckols mentioned in a subsequent interview that he could not find, and I have not been able to find either, Seymour Alpert updated it to 22 calories, saying that his math was wrong. All right. So Greg Nuckols was like, nah, we could just use 25 calories because it makes the math a heck of a lot easier. Now, I posted a video on it on April 30th on my Instagram. And the night before that, as I was creating the social media post, I thought, well, this math is like not super complicated, but there is a little bit of, pen and paper and maybe calculator that people will have to do. I'd love if I could just build a calculator for them. So I called my friend and I said, 9 p.m. I said, hey, I give you some money. And if you want to work on something right now. And he was like, I mean, he works with me on a lot of projects. He's a web developer. He's so freaking smart and such a good friend to me. And he's like, yep, I'm on it. So, I mean, he started working on it right then and there. I gave him all the numbers that I would need, the layout that I would want for this website, this calculator. And it would, calculate somebody's estimated body fat percentage using the Navy body fat calculation. And then it would, obviously with somebody's weight, we have their body fat percentage, we have their weight. Let's say somebody is 200 pounds and 10% body fat. That would be egregious numbers. That would be like a very, 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 very muscular person. But let's just say it for, easy math sake, 200 pounds, 10% body fat. What do we got? 20 pounds of body fat. We multiply 20 pounds times by about 25 calories. We get 500 calories. That would be their max fat loss rate is 500 calories below their maintenance. So we also have a maintenance calculator and a nutrition calculator as a whole. So anyway, most people are not 200 pounds and 10% body fat. I don't have the numbers in front of me to tell you what most people are. I don't want to necessarily assume in that way, but most people are, first off, 10 to 20% would be, for men, would be relatively equally healthy in terms of body fat percentage. Going too far below that or too far above that starts to potentially have a detriment to your health. And then for women, we add 8 to 10%. So about 18 to 30%. Women naturally have higher body fat percentage. That's normal. And going, again, far below that or far above that could potentially have a negative impact on your health. So what this means is, let's say there is a woman who is, I don't know, 180 pounds, right? And maybe she doesn't have a whole lot of muscle, and she uses this Navy body fat calculation where we use circumference measurements of height, age. Well, that's not a circumference measurement, obviously, but we use age, height, and then the circumference measurements of neck, waist, and hips. Let's say this calculation, which is just an estimation, but it's good enough for our uses. Let's say she's 180 pounds and she finds out, oh my gosh, I am 50% body fat, for example. This is not necessarily outside of the realm of possibility. It's very possible. I've seen it plenty of times. That would mean she has, 180 times by 50% rather, is 90 pounds of body fat. If we multiply that by 25 calories, because 25 calories per pound is the suggested number by Seymour Alpert / Greg Nuckols, right? That would put you in a 2,250 calorie deficit per day. You can see the problem here. There were not too many. I mean, there are over 400 comments on that post at the time of recording. It'll, probably continue climbing. This is not me telling you that you should be in a 2,000 plus calorie deficit. Like, obviously, right? Most people might not even maintain at 2,000 calories. Maybe they do. Maybe it's 2,200. Maybe it's 2,500. Could be 3,000. Could be 1,800 though as well. So do I want you to be eating 0 calories a day? No, of course not. It's more, it's more to show you, to highlight the possible, rate that you could go. And it might be a little bit more realistic to wrap your head around if you are a leaner individual. It's, if you're 175 and 15% body fat, it might be kind of interesting to see like, oh, I could be in an X, calorie deficit without, worrying about too much muscle loss or things like that. Now, obviously on this podcast, I've talked about, fat loss and how going faster with fat loss slash weight loss, you decrease the odds of gaining muscle, but it is possible depending on your rate and your lifting and your sleep and your genetics and your protein intake and your stress management and all these things. It is possible to gain muscle and lose body fat at the same time. But again, the further deficit we get into, the less likely that becomes. So I wouldn't see this as like, oh, I need to be in a 2,000 calorie deficit or whatever it says for you. It's more, okay, that's the max potential. Now I need to figure out what's a good rate for me, realistic. Just because my car could go 140 miles per hour or whatever, doesn't mean that I should. I always like saying the example of, you know, are you in a school zone or are you on the highway, right? We don't want to go 80 miles an hour in a school zone, but on a highway, so it's context dependent, right? And that's the same way I'd like you to approach your nutritional decisions, your rate of weight loss, things like that. So if you want the link to that max fat loss rate calculator, I do currently have it. It's in the show notes. It is currently live. TBD on if it will stay live. I am not sure on that. One person called it a scam, which was a very interesting thing to say. This person did not follow me. So just kind of found it on, her For You page or her, Reels tab, whatever. But for her to message me and say it was a scam, again, I'm not asking for any money. It's free to use, and it does cost me every single time somebody uses it. So I have an email capture as part of it that, allows me to keep it free because then I can, kind of nurture my email list and eventually, show off different products and services that I am, coming out with and things like that. But yeah, just that was kind of a gut punch for somebody to call it a scam. I know it's just one person, but if you worked really hard on something, you're really excited about it. You spend a bunch of money trying to set it up, and then you do it for free, and it's costing you every time somebody uses it. It's not a great feeling, but I digress. Anyways, if you have questions about it, please don't hesitate to shoot me a message on Instagram, email me, things like that. All right, let's get into the Q&A now that I've covered that. So the first question: why is it harder to lose the last 10 pounds? I've been in a cut for 5 weeks and lost 10 pounds. That's really fast. I want to lose another 10, so I'm lean, going into maintenance, and maybe even a surplus, so it takes a while to build fat, but it seems progress slowed a bit. I lowered my calories by 200 more to ramp it up. Okay. So first off, you were in a cut for 5 weeks, you lost 10 pounds. That's quick. Losing 2 pounds per week is very difficult. It assumes that you have to be in roughly a 1,000 calorie deficit per day. Definitely intense, definitely aggressive. You must have used my calculator. I'm kidding. This question came in way before the calculator was out. But yeah, why is it harder, as you get leaner? It doesn't matter if it's last 5 pounds, 10 pounds. People often say like, oh, the last 5 pounds, last 10 pounds aren't worth it. I think that's up to you. I don't think we should ever say like what's worth it and what's not. That's always up to the individual. And if those are your goals, then I think we should give you the tools to go for it. I have been extremely, extremely lean. I tried to get, down to a certain weight to make weight for a powerlifting competition. I ended up dropping out because I was so lean. And so I think the last 5 pounds, the air quote last 5 pounds, it kind of depends on like what those last 5 pounds look like. Are you sub 10% body fat for a man? Like, are you sub 8%? Or are you like sub 15%, 16% for a woman? Man, then yeah, that's going to start getting really, really, really hard. But, it's also like some people genetically that might be easier. Lifestyle, their environment, their career, their, whatever it is. Like, this is easier for me. You know what I mean? And I don't want to necessarily downplay the hard work that I've had to put in to get the physique that I have, which I'm proud of, but it is easier for me. This is my job. I read research, I apply it with other people, I coach people, so I have a good understanding of how to coach myself as well. Exercise is could I do my job without ever lifting? Sure. Yeah, okay. But I do see lifting and managing my nutrition as a part of my job because, like it or not, I am a walking billboard. Some people say that we shouldn't, I don't know. There's that idea that you shouldn't trust a like an overweight personal trainer. I don't necessarily agree with that. The way somebody looks, the shape that their body is in, tells you nothing about their knowledge or their compassion, their empathy, um, their worth, how good they are at their job. Like it just doesn't. It's not. It's not realistic. However, that said, I do also understand that there is an implicit bias that people have, and I get it, that if I was not in shape, that maybe less people would purchase my programs or, want to work with me. If you go to a tattoo artist and the tattoo artist has the worst tattoos you've ever seen with really uneven lines and just bad design and things like that, you'd kind of question them, right? Or you go to a barber and they have a really, really bad haircut, you'd kind of be like, ooh, a little leery. Now, again, I'm not saying that tattoo artist or that barber is not very good at their job. Maybe those are decisions that they have made for themselves and that's the way they like it. And that's absolutely okay. Um, but it's just to say, I do understand that there is an implicit bias, for better or for worse, that this is part of my job. So, all that to say, let's actually get into the question. Wow, I really detoured there. So, why is it harder to lose the last X pounds, whatever X is? So, as body fat decreases, your body, and just weight in general decreases, your body is going to try and resist further fat loss. There's going to be a change in your hormones. Maybe there is an increase in ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone. Maybe there's a decrease in leptin, which is the satiety hormone. So you're hungrier and you're feeling less satisfied from meals that you're eating. And your energy expenditure is going to drop. Even if you try to move more, increase your steps, your baseline energy expenditure is going to start to decrease. Now, if you use MacroFactor, you're going to see this. You're going to see it on their expenditure chart. It happens every single time for me. I move into a deficit and my calories start just getting boom, boom, drop, 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 drop. And it's like every single weekly check in with that app. It's, a big slash here, a big slash there. This is a normal thing. And so this is called metabolic adaptation. I'm pretty sure I've done an episode on this, specifically on, episode 19. I did talk about metabolic adaptation in depth. But just for like a quick, 1 minute recap, our body is going to adapt to the energy that we put into it. And so if we are putting more energy into it, there will be a degree of increased energy expenditure, and largely subconscious, largely through something called NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Maybe I start tapping my foot more. Maybe I start pacing around more. Maybe I start moving my hands around as I talk more, things like that, right? And, conversely, if we start decreasing our energy intake, our body does not want us to starve. So it's an evolutionary adaptation that it will start to decrease our energy expenditure. And maybe we do start to kind of lean against, a chair or a wall instead of standing up, just very small changes in the way that we expend energy. Very, very small ways to conserve energy. I mean, our body has been adapting for a long, 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 long time. And I mean, how many years have we had a Walmart down the street where we can get as much food as we want? And how many years have we had these hyper palatable foods, which are super delicious and super calorie dense? Like the last 100? Probably less. I mean, I know Walmart hasn't been around for 100 years. I don't know, maybe like what, 40 years? I don't know when Walmart was founded. Let's see. When was Walmart founded? 1962. Okay, so we've had it for 63 years. And it's not just to say Walmart, it's just grocery stores in general, right? Going back 200, 300 years ago, I mean, what was the process for getting food? You'd probably have to go purchase it from some kind of market, assuming that there was a farmer in the area. We didn't have big trucks and planes to be able to move food around to the, probably not the same degree, the same type of food preservation techniques, in terms of either preservatives. And we did have salt to preserve some food, but we didn't have refrigerators. Were not around. They had ice boxes, I think, at that time. I'm sure they did at that time. I'm not real up to date with my history, if you could or could not tell. I'm not much of a historian, but all of this to say, the human body has been adapting for a very long time to prevent starvation. And it's only been recently that that's really not that much of a concern for a lot of people. Now, obviously, starvation still exists. I wish world hunger was a problem that we could solve a little bit quicker. I think if the billionaires chipped in a little bit more, we might be able to, but that's a topic for another day. So, the last 10 pounds, you are fighting this increase in hunger, this decrease in satiety, this decrease in energy expenditure. And yeah, I mean, you're probably going to have to continually decrease your calories to a point. Weight loss rate is probably going to slow down unless you're very aggressive with, your calorie cuts. And even then, water retention can mask fat loss. Let's say, you're in a deficit. You're like, okay, I know my expenditure numbers roughly. I know my maintenance numbers roughly. And I'm in a 2, 3, 4, 5, 600 calorie deficit, something like that. And let's say you're staying the same weight, 150, 150, 150, 150, 0.5, 151, 150. And it's like, what the hell is going on? I'm in a deficit, but my weight isn't going down. You might be holding on to water. And then there might be this situation where you have this whoosh, where all of a sudden you drop all the water, and you might notice it because all of a sudden you'll like pee a ton like one day and you'll be like, oh my gosh. And then the scale will drop and it's like one 2-pound drop out of nowhere. So, you would be, if you're coming up in those last 10 pounds, maybe you're the right person to use the max fat loss rate calculator, honestly, because if you're getting leaner, it can be helpful to see like, okay, how fast can I go, or how fast is too fast, either way, it should be noted that when you lose weight, it's probably from a combination. I hesitate to say this. I'm going to say this because this is what like kind of research has shown, that it's a combination of both body fat and muscle. Typically in a 75-25 ratio is what a lot of researchers say, like Dr. Bill Campbell, for example. 75-25 ratio, 75% being body fat. However, I do wonder how much of that is like glycogen, which does qualify as lean. There's body fat mass and then fat-free mass, and fat-free mass is anything that's not body fat. So your bone, your muscle, your water, your glycogen inside the muscle. And so how much of it is that? Because we do have a lot of research showing that you can gain muscle and lose body fat at the same time. So I think it's not as black and white as just saying like, 75-25, that's what you should expect. I think when we come into a fat loss phase and we just assume that we are going to lose muscle, I think we're putting ourselves at a major disadvantage, because I don't know, the brain is really, really powerful. And if you can just tell yourself like, okay, I'm at least going to maintain muscle mass, or I could even gain muscle mass. I think if you go in with that kind of perspective, you might push yourself a little bit harder in the gym. You might be prioritizing nutrition a little bit more. Oh, my headset just died. I thought something else happened. We're good. And yeah, I just think that it's something that you should come into the fat loss phase and the and maintenance and a bulk with this kind of like, I want to say positive attitude, but I like saying to myself at least that like I'm on the attack, and I am attacking my workouts. I am coming, you're on offense. You are trying to build muscle. You are trying to, rather than like defense, like, oh, I'm trying to lose body fat, but I'm trying to maintain as much muscle as possible. No, like, let's be aggressive with this. Let's push ourselves in the gym. Let's try to build muscle and lose body fat at the same time, because I don't know, I just think like it is possible, especially if you're pushing yourself and trying to set up your diet in an intelligent way and managing enough sleep. And anyway, so yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Is it's just, yeah, it is harder. It's I explained all the reasons. I don't really need to rehash this one. All right, let's go on to the next question. Thoughts on 75 hard challenges that have blown up again before summer on TikTok. There's also the 75 medium and 75 soft challenge. Now, I've heard of the 75 medium, 75 soft challenge. I'm not super familiar with them. I know like they spawned from the 75 hard and they're easier variations of them. Things I do and things I don't like about it. So 75 hard could build discipline, right? You are kind of committing. And for those who are unfamiliar with 75 hard, it's this challenge that was created by, you know what? I'm actually not sure. It might be made by Andy Frisella, or at least he wrote a book on it. let me just look this up. 75 hard is a 75-day challenge. Participants must complete 5 critical daily tasks that double down on exercising. Damn. You got to exercise twice a day, stick to a rigid nutrition plan. What is it? Okay. Follow a nutrition plan of your choice. No alcohol or cheat meals. That's step 1. Okay. I don't love when people have like these super specific nutrition plans. That's one thing. I am very much a all foods fit. Flexible dieting has been shown in the research to be superior in terms of like really rigid adherence to a specific macronutrient percentage ratio or a specific dietary pattern. I will say the Mediterranean diet, it's pretty plant-based, lean meats, plenty of fish. So you're getting a lot of omega-3 fatty acids. So those things, like, that is a healthy dietary pattern for sure. But I think the faster that I don't know, I think for the majority of people, it'd be better to kind of work within the dietary pattern that they enjoy and then maybe make small, simple swaps to make it more nutrient dense, more satiating, depending on their goal, of course. If somebody has bulking goals in mind, then they need to kind of lean into more of the calorie dense things, right? Every now and then. So, and then no alcohol. Okay, look, I'm not a big hater of that. I think alcohol is one that if there were more advisories and more risks and warnings on alcohol, I think we would have a healthier population. Not just from the calorie perspective of it, but also that it is like a class 1 or grade 1 carcinogen. The WHO put out a statement, I think in 2023 or something like that, that said alcohol is not safe in any dose. Yeah, so I think that I wish more people were aware of the harms of alcohol. So I don't hate that one, but I also think like just telling somebody no alcohol, boom, I think it creates this dichotomous thinking, which is exemplary of the 75 hard challenge, that it creates this all or nothing kind of like feedback loop where if you miss a day, you have to start over from the beginning. And I know that a lot of type A people might think like, oh, that's what I need. I need that. But what happens after that? What happens after these 75 days? You have created these extremely rigid thought patterns and reinforced them over and over and over again that I was recently talking with a client, and she said, a one-on-one client, and she said that this is the first time that she's been in a deficit that she hasn't felt like she's looking forward to the end so that she can eat whatever she wants, because she has created this momentum with flexible dieting and this pattern and this lifestyle with flexible dieting that she's able to incorporate foods that she wants. And yeah, she does have to cut back on them because she has fat loss goals right now. But to hear that, that's what I want. And I think 75 hard for a lot of people could do the opposite of that. And then cheat meals, I really, really don't like calling meals cheat meals. I don't like calling foods good or bad. There are good and bad, or I should say there are better and worse dietary patterns, but in terms of an individual food, an individual meal being good or bad, or a cheat meal or things like that, I just really disagree with it from a philosophical perspective. I don't think that's dichotomizing your food in that way is a good way of building healthy mental associations. And I especially think if you have kids, you need to really, really watch your language around these things. But even with yourself, even if you don't have kids, even if it's just with yourself, I think saying that, if we constantly, put a food that's off limits in our brain, what happens when we, rip off that Band-Aid? You might overeat on it, right? Whereas if it's just a kind of a normal thing, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of saying cheat meals and things like that. I would rather, if somebody wants to eat a little bit more, just incorporate that in the plan. Why do you have to say that you're cheating? Like, it doesn't have to be this big thing where you're all of a sudden cheating on your diet. You just ate a little bit more one day. That doesn't, I don't know. I just don't think it's, all right. Anyways, part 2 of the 75 hard diet, or 75 hard challenge, is 2 45-minute workouts. One must be outside. I'm a big fan of exercise. I think working out every single day, twice a day for 75 days straight is, again, totally overdoing it. Um, one must be outside. I don't think there's anything wrong with, getting some sunlight. I think that's really good for us. Just kind of being out in nature is probably a really good thing for our mental health. However, again, I don't think that I just think this is really dichotomous, really, really reinforcing all or nothing thinking. 2 workouts a day, man, it's just that's a lot. And you're planning to lift or exercise for an hour and a half every single day for 75 days straight. Your recovery is going to be probably in the shitter, to be honest. Now it does say some choices are, like yoga, so that yoga could be, I mean, yoga's intense, but it's probably a little bit easier than 45 minutes of like high intensity interval training or lifting. So I don't know. I think that's too much. Part 3 is drink 1 gallon of water. So water needs are very individualized. I don't. There is one of like the leading researchers on hydration. He has a business card. I heard about this story a while back. He has a business card, and on the front of it, it's like name, phone number, email, stuff like that. But on the back of it is a urine color chart, and it just shows like if you're clear, you may be overhydrated. If you are light yellow, you're good. You're appropriately hydrated. And if it's dark yellow, moderate to dark yellow, you need to drink more. That is the way that we should really monitor our hydration status, is urine and thirst. Now, urine's a little bit more population wide, and the reason for that is because over time, especially in elderly people, they can start to lose the sensation of thirst. So just looking at your urine every once in a while, if it's fully clear, you're probably overhydrated, and we don't want to mess up the electrolyte balance within us. And you get electrolytes from your foods. You don't need an electrolyte supplement unless you're like really, really sweaty or whatever. And yeah, if it's moderate to dark yellow, then you need to drink more. My best advice is just like keep a water bottle nearby. But whenever we have like very specific water targets, I just disagree with them. Part 4, read 10 pages of a nonfiction personal development focused book. I think that's fine. Yeah, reading every day, that's cool. Nonfiction personal development focused book, that's totally fine. Again, 75 days straight of that. I do like the idea of kind of having some built-in flexibility, but that's really not the worst one. And then 5 is take a progress picture. And apparently this is every single day. I don't know. I think you're just not going to see many changes every day. If it's just to get in the habit of taking a progress picture, that's fine, I suppose. But I think, even if you do that once a month, that would still be fine. Even if you did a progress picture once every 2 months or 3 months, that would be sufficient as well. I personally do them about once a month. On the first of every month, I have a reminder to take measurements and progress photos. For measurements, I do circumference measurements around my neck, shoulders, chest, upper arms, like around the widest part of my upper arms, waist, hips, thighs, check like quads and hamstrings, and then calves. Oh, and then forearms as well. So I check I check a lot of stuff. And when I'm in a bulk, transparently, I do that every other month because like changes are just so freaking slow. And when I'm in a fat loss phase, I do that every month. But yeah, I don't know. I think hyper focusing on your body image, your photos, things like that, you're kind of taking away from some of the other benefits that come with lifting, like, reduction in cancer risk, reduction in diabetes, reduction in cardiovascular disease, reduction in Alzheimer's/dementia, better mental health, better bone density. There's a lot of benefits outside of the aesthetic side of things. And so if that's the only thing that you're looking at and you're doing it every single day, I think it'd be easy to kind of fall into that pit. So, yeah, apparently the medium and soft versions offer a little bit more flexibility and sustainability, which is cool. But I think certain challenges like this, maybe not the best call for a lot of people. And I think a better call would be taking stock of the habits that you have right now, thinking about who you want to become, and then maybe tweaking some of those habits and habit layering over time, not trying to go 0 to 100. If we want stuff to stick, we probably want to In terms of habits, we probably want to try to build one habit, make it consistent, and then increase the habit, shape it, over time into something that is a little bit more aligned with what we want to do long term. So start with the absolute minimum and then add to it over time. And then once we've mastered that one, once that one feels locked in, maybe it's going to the gym, then we add more. So, if somebody was like, okay, I want to go to the gym 3 times per week, how do we make that as small as possible? We don't even worry about going to the gym. We say 3 times a week, I'm going to get my gym shoes on. That's it. Like, can you put workout shoes on 3 times per week? Okay. Once you've done that and you feel really solid in that, once you feel like this is an absolute gimme, of course I can put my shoes on. It takes 30 seconds to do that. Once I can do that 3 times per week, now maybe we go put our gym shoes on and go for a walk. Maybe we do that 3 times per week. Okay, once that feels locked in, maybe we go to the gym and hop on the treadmill 3 times per week. Once that feels locked in, then you know what I'm saying? And you build it over time. Now you don't have to start. Your starting point, your ground zero will look different than somebody else's, right? And so it just depends on kind of where you're at, but make sure that your habit is scalable and the minimum possible level that you can 100% commit to, or at least maybe like 90% commit to it. I've just talked about not being super all or nothing, but I like viewing my own habits. Like, for example, the lifting. I have 5 workouts right now. I was doing like 3 or 4. Now I'm doing like 5, maybe probably 5 per week. I have a list of 5 different workouts, and I just get to them when I can. Yesterday or 2 days ago, Milo had an allergic reaction. We had to take him over to MedExpress, do the whole Zyrtec thing, and I was just like mentally drained. It was quite the adrenaline dump. And I didn't work out that day. And obviously, I think anybody with a brain would be like, yeah, I mean, that's a scary moment as a parent. And it's okay that you didn't work out that day. That doesn't mean you're a failure. But if I was doing the 75 hard challenge, now I restart. Now I'm a failure, right? And I just think that that's not the way that we need to approach ourselves with empathy and kindness. I frequently tell people, what would you, if a best friend was struggling with this, maybe it's not making a habit out of the gym. Maybe they've missed the gym for a while. Maybe they're overeating. If their best friend was struggling with this, what would you say? Like, wow, you're a piece of shit. You suck. You're doing horribly at this. Like, you'd be the worst best friend. You'd be the worst friend. You would be the bottom of the list of people I would call for advice, right? And I think anybody with a brain and a heart, especially, would be like, that's not the way I would treat my best friend. All right, so why the fuck are you treating yourself that way? I mean, what's up with this negative self-talk? It's exhausting. You're beating yourself up for no reason when you have very valid excuses and obstacles that you are trying to deal with. Maybe it's your job, maybe it's your family life, maybe it's your environment, maybe it's your mental health right now. But you need to stop being so hard on yourself. You need to give yourself a little bit of fucking compassion. Sorry for the F-bomb. I mean, I know I marked this one as explicit, but I try to refrain from the F-bombs. All right, got a little intense there. Let's reset. Next question. Have you ever thought about doing a reel or podcast about some better options when you go out or need to do fast food? Yeah, so could make a solid like a video or something like that. I did ask my Instagram audience if this would be helpful, and I got a ton of votes for yes. And then I asked, okay, well, what restaurants would you want me to do? And I got like 4 responses, and 3 of them were along the lines of like Mexican or Asian. I was kind of looking for like specific restaurants. In the past, I have done menus with ideas for specific restaurants. This was like back in 2020 or 2021. Post on my Instagram. I don't know if they're still there. I mean, you have to scroll back so far for that, but so really I would think about principles rather than specific menu options. I would think about principles. So prioritizing protein, just look at the menu. Obviously look at the calories, right? If you are in a fat loss phase, you're going to want to look at the calories. You're going to want to prioritize, calories based on your goal. You're going to want to prioritize protein. You're going to want to prioritize fiber ideally, and maybe decrease the amount of saturated fat that you eat. Now, we're talking about fast food, yeah, some of those things might be harder to either achieve or avoid, in terms of the saturated fat. So some easy wins: grilled chicken over fried chicken, for example. Water or zero/low calorie soda instead of a full calorie soda would be a great option. Maybe ask for sauces on the side, or just skip the sauces entirely. Sauces are super calorie dense. And so it's not about um, necessarily skipping fast food or restaurants entirely. It's about making intentional choices. How can you be as intentional as possible and play the hand you're dealt? Big believer in, this is your reality. This is the hand you were dealt. Not everybody gets dealt the same hand. Like, that's just the way it goes, right? And I wish there were better news. I wish we could all be, if not dealt the same hand, I wish we could all be given the opportunities to kind of level the playing field. I wish it were that way, and maybe someday we'll get to that point, with certain social systems and support and things like that. But as of right now, especially with like fitness and nutrition and things like that, and even just something as simple as like, your husband or wife, or your friend says, "I want to go out to eat tonight," and you're like, "Shit, I was planning on having like a grilled chicken salad at home. I already had it pre-planned, pre-logged." But you're also thinking like, well, I do want to go out with that person. I love them, or maybe just I like them. I hope if it's your husband or wife, you're not like, well, I like them. I hope it's I love them. um, but you got to make intentional choices, and especially if in a fat loss phase, that does mean sacrifice from time to time. That means that if you're in a fat loss phase, maybe don't get 2-3 drinks, alcoholic beverages. Maybe don't get the, I don't know, the 16-ounce steak with 1 pound of butter on it. Maybe don't get the triple chocolate molten lava cake for dessert. Maybe don't get an appetizer. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to make some kind of swaps. You got to, but I'd also, if this isn't a super frequent thing, zoom out a bit. Look at your weekly average calories. Let's say you're at, for example, 1,800 calories, and then you have, you're doing that every day, 6 days a week, and then one day you go 3,000 calories. I mean, I know it sounds like a lot, like 3,000, but when you split that out, it's really not that significant. You're 1,200 calories over your target. Split that out across 7 days. I mean, you're talking what, like 170 calories or something like that per day? What's 1,200 divided by 7? 171 calories. Did I say 170? If so, that is some crazy mental math. Anyway, so yeah, just try to be as intentional as possible. All right, next question. Do you still need to take a day of rest between weight workouts, or is that an old wives' tale? I wouldn't say it's an old wives' tale, but I also wouldn't say that it's like anything super concrete either. It kind of depends. You don't necessarily need to rest for a day after every single workout. If you're brand new to exercise and you're doing like full body lifts, though, for example, probably not a bad idea to rest more days than you lift, because your body's just going to be trying to handle the soreness, the muscle damage, the novelty to exercise, and so probably better just to maybe lift 2-3 times per week rather than like 6-7 times per week. Now, as you get more advanced, adding frequency, days per week, totally fine. It also depends like on your split. Are you doing full body workouts with 30 sets or something like that, which would be, intense? It'd be kind of a lot. Then yeah, maybe don't do that same thing again the very next day. But if you're doing maybe an upper lower split, you could do an upper and then a lower the next day. If you're doing a push pull leg, for example, you could do push pull leg rest. So it just depends on the split. Even training the same muscle group back to back days could be warranted, could be context dependent, could be fine, especially if it's not super high volume. For example, if you are doing 6 sets of biceps, but you split that out 3 days on day one, I'm sorry, 3 sets on day one and 3 sets on day two, like, if your biceps are able to recover and they feel fine, maybe not the worst thing in the world. Would it maybe be a little bit better to give them 1 day of rest between training them? Potentially. But so I would see it as Not like black and white of is it this way or is it that way, but it's more as with most things in fitness and nutrition, it's context dependent. Um, yeah, yeah, I feel like I answered that one pretty good. Two more questions. If wanting to add more volume to specific muscles, can I repeat same exercise 2 times per week? Say adding kickbacks for glutes onto an upper day for some added volume when I already do kickbacks on a lower day. Yeah, totally fine. Totally fine. Right now, I'm training my abs like 4 or 5 times per week, and I do like the same 1 or 2 exercises for them. I do cable crunches and I do gar hammers right now. And yeah, so that'd be totally fine. This is exactly why, splits really don't matter in terms like a split is like full body or upper lower, push pull leg, or, whatever it is, right? The splits matter very little. They are a way to organize your training volume and your frequency, but they aren't like, oh, this is the gold standard split or anything like that. It's really goal dependent. And how much volume, what's a priority muscle? How much volume do you want on that priority muscle? How many times per week should you train it? Probably more than once per week. So yeah, totally fine to add kickbacks for your glutes onto the upper day. Totally fine to repeat the same exercise 2 times per week. For a while, for about 8 months, I only had 3 workouts, 2 upper body days and 1 lower body day. And I would repeat those same 2 upper body days twice per week each. So I was doing basically 4 upper body days per week and then 1 lower body day. Now, I've recently switched, just, kind of keep it fresh, trying something else out. Maybe I'll talk about that at some point, like what my new program is, and I don't know if that'd be interesting, and like why the decisions I made. I don't know if that'd be interesting or not, but yeah. So all that to say, totally fine. Repeating exercises, all good. You don't need a new exercise for every single muscle group. There are maybe some benefits to that, but I would say for each muscle group that you train, if you just pick like 2 exercises for each one, maybe 3, 2 or 3 exercises for each muscle group, you're golden. You're all good. You don't really need to overdo it with this novelty and this super variety. Not to say it'd be a huge downside, but there is a skill component to certain to basically every exercise. Varying degrees of that, of course. A bicep curl is pretty straightforward versus something like, I don't know, an RDL. Sometimes people struggle getting enough hip flexion and like bending their knees and not letting their knees travel forward and things like that. So there is a skill component. There is a neurological adaptation component to each exercise that maybe it's marginally better to stick with some exercises for a while rather than like bouncing between exercises every single week. But I don't know. Not a huge deal if you really, really appreciate variety. All right, finally, I'm in Italy for a month, no gyms anywhere. What can I do so I minimize muscle loss? All right, so first off, this question was from 3 weeks ago. I put a Q&A, so my bad. I hope you've enjoyed your vacation in Italy. You're now in the 3rd week. I hope you've been enjoying it. I hope it's been a very fun time, and sorry for taking 3 weeks to answer this. But I got some good news. You're not going to lose that much muscle. A lot of the research points to it takes a while for us to start the muscle loss process. And even when we do start the muscle loss process, it's very slow. So that's some good news. Even better news, there's something called the myonuclear domain theory, where even if muscle cells shrink, the nucleus stays behind. We're not sure if permanently or if it's just for a while. That is still kind of up for debate, in my opinion. But because the nucleus, or like the brain of the muscle cell, stays behind, it makes muscle regain much, much, much faster. So what could you have done to minimize muscle loss? You could have just done some body weight movements. First off, overarching, enjoy your vacation. That's always my blanket statement, is like, don't feel like you have to exercise, but a month is a longer period than most people are like, well, I'm gone for a week. I want to lift 5 times that week. And it's like, if you really want to, by all means. I still lift on vacation because I enjoy it. It brings me happiness. But for other people, like maybe they just see lifting as a way to stay healthy. get healthy and stay healthy. And that's totally fine. You're not going to lose anything from a week, but for a month, man, it's a decent amount of time. What you could have done is just some body weight movements, or even movements with your suitcase. Fill up your suitcase with some books, or even just clothes or things like that, or just use something heavy, right? And maybe do some Romanian deadlifts, stiff leg deadlifts, for example. You could do some split squats, whether that's rear foot elevated, or commonly called Bulgarian split squats. You could just do like both feet on the ground split squats, like standard split squats. You could do push-ups. You could potentially do inverted rows, depending on the situation. An inverted row, you'll probably have to Google that one or YouTube it. But it's basically like you would go under a chair or a table and put your hands on the edges of it, for example, and then pull yourself toward it. There is also a way that I've seen that you could like use a towel, like put not two towels together, throw them over a door, shut the door so it's anchored, and then kind of like row yourself toward that. I've seen that. Be careful with that one, because like, what if the door swings open? Obviously you could do it so the door frame is, well, the correct way, but what if the towels slip? That one kind of concerns me about doing the towel situation. But yeah, if you're under like a really sturdy table or chair, that's a possible way of doing it. Yeah, maybe you could do like dips between chairs or between like two couches or something like that. Again, very stable. But there are a lot of body weight options that you could do. But you also maybe don't. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you not to worry about it, because it's your body and that is your choice. If you'd like to maintain muscle, all good. Also, in addition to exercise, like exercise will be the number one stimulus for muscle growth and muscle maintenance, but trying to prioritize protein, trying to get decent sleep, those would be good options too. Okay, those are all the questions. If you'd like your question answered, check out my Instagram. Every Tuesday, I open up a anonymous question box, and I answer some on my Instagram story over time, and I answer some on the podcast, and maybe some on the email as well. Although I will say the email now has a separate question box that is exclusively for email subscribers, where I'm going to answer their questions in depth. And I'm also going to do form reviews every once in a while. If somebody uploads a form video to the email question situation, then I will give tailored feedback. It will be posted. It's public, so your form video, I can block out your face if you'd like me to, but I'll give you a personalized form video about what you did and what I would tweak if I were you. All right, that's everything. Once again, check out the Change Project coming late June. Go ahead and give this a 5-star rating if you haven't already, please. I'd really appreciate it. Legion, if you need any supplements, use code ALEXTME. That's Alex TME for 20% off your first order, double points on purchase. And finally, check out the best diet app on the market, MacroFactor. Use code Alex for a 2-week free trial. All these things support me, and I really appreciate it. I hope you have an awesome day. Thank you for listening. Take care.